Welcome back to this special edition of the Fast Lane. Trey Lyle here with you, and the joy of two area schools playing the same opponent in the same season. We can bring someone back to preview another game. This time we're previewing Liberty with Middle Tennessee State. Sam Doughton back here on this special edition of the Fast Lane. Good to have you right back, Sam. And jumping right into it, last time we talked about Bailey Hoffman being the quarterback for Middle Tennessee State, and he's not even with the program anymore. Chase Cunningham has stepped in at quarterback. How has that transition happened, and how has the team responded from it?
Well, Trey, thank you first off for having me back on. I'm really excited to be here. And, with Chase Cunningham, I think Chase has really sort of given a whole new bit of energy to Middle Tennessee this season. Chase was a former walk-on. He's currently under scholarship, but he came to the program as a walk-on and has been a backup for several years now. But through that time, it has really worked hard and earned the respect of a lot of his teammates and everyone else on the team. And now that he's finally gotten a chance to step up in the starting role, he's gotten a chance to not only showcase his skills, but showcase his leadership. And I think the team has really responded well to who he is as a person, who he is as a leader, and who he is as a quarterback. Comparing him to Bailey, he offers a little bit of a different skill set. He's a little more of a dual threat guy. I still think he's pass first more than anything, but he offers more of a zone read type look to what he can bring to an offense. And that through his two starts has really helped keep defenses honest against Marshall and against Charlotte, and has led to a lot more production, not just from him and the receivers, but also from the running backs on the team as well, because they have to account for, 16 coming out of the backfield as a runner. And I think he's really made the offense a lot better and a lot more confident in how they can do as a unit.
Yeah, and the offense has improved. Obviously, they go from scoring 14 against Virginia Tech, 13 against UTSA, to 39 in a loss to Charlotte, and then 34 in the win against Marshall, which they dominated a majority of that game. I was following your updates as it was happening, so it kept me in the loop. While it was a busy Saturday, and so how has the offense looked in these last two games with Cunningham under the helm? It looks they're putting more points up, which is going to be a thing they'll need to do against this high-powered offense in Liberty.
Well, I think the key is, Trey, is that they're moving the chains. They're getting themselves into a lot more manageable second down and third down situations if they're not getting a big play on first down, which they also still have that ability. I think that was one thing Bailey brought, was the ability to go over the top with a deep ball or something like that. And they still have that to some extent. I don't think Chase's arm is quite as strong as Bailey's was. But the key with Chase is that Chase is a guy that can get you, an 8-yard run on first down, 6-yard run on second down. And then because he can do that, that opens up holes for your running back to get, a 12-yard burst, for Tom Mobley to run 41 yards for a touchdown on 4th and 2. And then, when they're creeping up on that, you got a chance to take a shot over the top, which he did against Marshall. I think in the second half of the Marshall game, it was torrential downpour here in Murfreesboro. And when they went up 3 scores after Reed Blankenship returned a fumble for a touchdown, they sort of moved away from passing. They thought it was not something that was necessarily necessary given the time left on the clock for them to do. So I think they were wanting to run the ball a little bit better, but obviously Marshall responded to the rain and put some people in the box. But in general, it's just a much more balanced offense. And I think last game, Tom Mobley ran for 132 yards out of running back. First time a running back's run for at least 100 yards this year for Middle. So it's not only helping out the passing game and just helping out with his own run game, but Chase is opening up opportunities for the rest of the offense to keep going. And I think that's what's been so exciting about his first 2 starts really for the team.
The defense is kind of has been okay. They still allowed, the most points in the last 2 games with the offensive improvement. And this is by far, obviously you would put Virginia Tech there, but I would argue this is by far their toughest test, facing a guy in Malik Willis, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. How big of a challenge is it for this defense? What have they talked about heading into this game against such a dynamic quarterback?
Well, Trey, Rick Stockstill in his press conference this week said that Liberty is the best team that they're facing this season, or that they've faced this far this season. And I don't really think you can argue with him necessarily, in large part because of Malik Willis. They talked a lot about the significant challenge that Malik does. I think Reed Blankenship summed it up best, for that he's a pass-first quarterback who can also run and break tackles. And that's just a really difficult challenge to deal with, because not only can he have 4 receivers have catches of 30 or more yards like they did against UMB, but he can also add 150 yards on the ground with his legs and break a bunch of tackles while doing it. So, they suggested they're probably going to spy him. quite a lot. I think no one's going to be shocked to see that someone in the front seven will spy Willis. But it's more going to be a matter of containing him, making sure those explosive plays don't happen, don't let him get out of the pocket, and making sure the receivers stay in front of them. I think that's going to be the biggest key for the defense. And then just hope the offense can keep him off the field as long as they can. I think that's going to be the keys for them this week, is to make sure the offense isn't turning the ball over, staying on the field, is moving the chains. Because if Willis doesn't have the ball in his hands, he can't hurt you. And so I think that's going to be the biggest key for them.
That was something they did well in Virginia Tech. Looking back, is they won the time of possession battle, in that game. So how can they do it again? Do you expect more of a run heavy offense in this one? Obviously, if you look back to the only loss for Liberty, it was really Syracuse's run game that kind of was able to, one, keep Malik Willis off the field, but kind of get, this is a really good defense. And that was kind of the weakness they showed.
Yeah, well, Liberty's defense also poses a lot of challenge. I think, Malik gets so many headlines for Liberty that the defense's prowess through 5 games of the season sort of gets a little bit underrated by people coming in from the outside. That's, I think they're top 20 in the country in defensive stop rate, which is really, really impressive. And that's one thing that, the team mentioned in the press conference this week, was how fast, how agile they are, how quickly they get to the ball. And so that'll be a challenge. I think the key will be to running the ball and keeping that balance they've had. One thing they did really well against Virginia Tech was hitting the short out routes against zones, finding the soft spots in the zones and keeping the ball moving that way. Liberty's the team that blitzes and runs a lot of zone blitzes. So I'm actually pretty confident that they'll be able to have some success against those sort of zone coverage schemes so far. That's something that the Brent Dearman, offensive coordinator for middle, has shown the ability to execute with. And Chase is really good at that short to intermediate accuracy on his passes. So I'm pretty confident they'll be able to move the chains so long as the offensive line gives him enough time. And so some of that's going to be play calling, but the offensive line has been a very hot and cold unit for the teams so far. Against UTSA, they were very cold, and they've had 2 pretty good weeks, the last 2 weeks against Charlotte and against Marshall. But so if the offensive line the last 2 weeks shows up, I think they'll be able to stay in the game like they did against Virginia Tech for most of the way. If the offensive line of UTSA shows up, we might have a different story.
How important is the start for this game? Like the first quarter kind of, that's where, Liberty was able to kind of come on strong in the second half. So they have a lot of momentum from their last game against UAB. How important would it be to take advantage of a team, that's had slow starts in Liberty? That's kind of been their MO this year. They get off to a slow start and then they kind of pour it on late. Like if Middle Tennessee is going to be in this game, it comes down to, can they take advantage of a maybe more slow starting team that Liberty has been?
Well, you're 100% right, Trey. Every team needs to start hot, and I think that was one of the big keys to the win over Marshall, is that Middle came out and started hot. It was their first time they scored a touchdown in an opening drive in, I think, 14 games across the past 2 seasons. That if the offense starts fast and the defense gets some stops, and you all of a sudden look up and it's 14-0, that you feel pretty good about yourself in that way. Now, maybe that's a lot to ask against a team like Liberty that's shown themselves to be, in my opinion, I think one of easily the best 30, if not top 25 teams in the country so far, even with that loss to Syracuse. That could be a little bit trickier to figure out. But the keys to winning upsets like this when you're such a huge road dog is you just got to stick around. And if they can stick around long enough to where it's in the fourth quarter and it's a 1-score game, maybe some doubt starts to creep in on that thing. So I think the fast start will be crucial for that. And like you said, Liberty at halftime against UAB was 3-3, and they ended up winning 36-12. So that, if he can come out and have a lead at halftime, you can withstand a little bit of that second half onslaught.
Well, going into the game, 19.5, you mentioned it. Big road underdog once again as Middle Tennessee State heads again into the state of Virginia. They're going to be very familiar with it. Obviously, they'll also play ODU in conference play, so they're keeping up. They're having a fun time in the state of Virginia this year. Is the Blue Raiders. What do you expect in this game? Do you think they can keep it close, or do you just expect Liberty kind of, they I don't want to say they're mulligan, but they kind of got sucker punched by Syracuse and they've kind of responded well, and they're going to keep, just the onslaught going against Middle Tennessee State?
Well, Trey, the UAB game certainly raised a lot of eyebrows around Conference USA. I think when that storyline came across, particularly because it was so close. in that first half, that as the second half opened up and Liberty started to pull away, it really drew a lot of attention from around the conference, and including, here in Murfreesboro. I think they definitely have a chance to keep it close. I think Chase Cunningham really has revitalized just sort of the whole juice and mojo around the team. And being a team like Marshall that was predicted to finish first in your division at home, even with all the rain and everything, gives them a lot more confidence in what they're doing and what they're executing. Whether they can pull out the win ultimately, we'll see. I think there's a chance there if a lot of things go well, and in particular if they can force a couple turnovers. Middle Tennessee, I believe, is plus 14 on turnover margin this season. So they forced 14 turnovers. So anyway, they've shown the ability to generate some turnovers on the defensive side. And if they get an interception, get a fumble recovery or two, and get the offense to move the chains a little bit, I think they have a good chance of staying in the game and it coming down to the wire. If they turn the ball over a couple times, if they're not able to move the change, if Malik Willis is able to sort of take over the game like he did in Birmingham, it's going to be quite a different story.
Well, Sam, I want to thank you for hopping on once again. Good news is UVA does not play Middle Tennessee State, so I don't have to bother you anymore. The rest of the season, you don't have to worry about me.
You don't want me on when Old Dominion comes to visit in November? Come on now.
They're a little outside of our listening area.
Fair.
So
that is fair.
So
Lynchburg and Norfolk are pretty far apart.
So little bit out. Well, but I will think about you that week. They do play. Luckily, Middle Tennessee State doesn't have to go to Virginia once again. They welcome the Monarchs of ODU. Yeah. And so, but how can our listeners connect with you and, maybe read up some about this Blue Raiders team, Liberty fans heading into this game on Saturday?
Well, fans can find me on Twitter. You can search at SJ Doughton. That's DOUGHTON on Twitter. That's the easiest place to find my work. And then if you want to read up about the football team, you can find my writing at GoBlueRaiders.com, the Middle Tennessee State Athletic Communications home. And you'll find a lot of my features and columns on the team. And there's a lot of good content the past couple of weeks of how the team's offense in particular sort of revitalized itself. And you can learn a little bit about how they've been successful in the turnover margin as well. There's a feature from back, I believe, around the Virginia Tech game about how their offseason turnover circuit has really helped them to make the most of those opportunities in those games. So I'll learn a little bit about Blue Raiders. I think there's no better spot than GoBlueRaiders.com, and just go to our football tab and you'll be able to find a lot of our clips there.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me on this special edition of the Fast Lane. As always, you can connect with me at TreyLyleVT, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And as always, also Fast Lane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well, if they're working, of course. Thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Fast Lane.